I do believe the market will identify itself by the inability to source product before this is all said and done. People don't understand we're perilously close to that already. And that comes at a time when just a very small percentage of people globally own any metals at all.
Physical silver and gold in your hands, personal service, competitive prices, and zero complaints. That's Miles Franklin. Call us at 1-800-822-8080 or email us at info@milesfranklin.com. Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with the Miles Franklin Market Update. And back with us today is Andy Schectman, our president. Andy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Nice to talk with you again, Elijah. Thanks for checking in.
Definitely. We're having you on early this week on Thursday. We want to kind of get a rundown of what we've just seen in the metals. We saw a sharp decline. Now we're rebounding today. What is your take on what's happening right now?
Well, I think that in large part, the sell-off was unjustified in the face of global record demand, in the face of puffs of smoke emanating from all corners of the globe, whether it be the COMEX, the London Metal Exchange, the Shanghai Gold Exchange, coming out of India, the Perth Mint, the Royal Mint of the UK, stories of Mexico no longer selling Libertads, the difficulty getting product all year long from the U.S. and the Canadian Mint. I've talked about with you, Elijah, for almost a year now, my belief, and to my own detriment, really, that the market would define itself by inability to source product readily. I got a lot of crap from that. People saying he's talking his book. Well, as you can see, I haven't been talking my book. I come from a perspective that very few people, if any, own precious metals and understand it. Now, granted, in 31 years, I've never seen a more immediate expansion of knowledge into this arena, which is giving me great optimism. But by the same token, that optimism is met with the realistic view that one of these days we're going to wake up and it will be very difficult to source any product, because all of these puffs of smoke, where the question becomes, is there fire burrowing beneath the smoke? Whether it be people not being able to fabricate unallocated programs at Perth or get product at Perth, whether it be people not being able to get product at the Royal Mint. Now, when I say people, I'm talking people in these respective countries trying to go to the facility and get product at a window like they always used to. Whether it be Mexico no longer sending off the Libertads, whether it be copious amounts of metal taken off of Shanghai and India and the London Metals Exchange and the COMEX, backdooring of SLV, inability to get gold, eagles, and buffaloes with any ease since second week in January. All of these things that are happening with less than 2% of the public even knowing what a gold coin feels like or looks like. What happens when that number becomes 5% or 8% like we saw in 1980? People who are under 50 years of age won't remember 1980 when the Dow Jones was 850 and so was gold, that they actually used to be 1-to-1, and won't remember an environment where no one wanted stocks. They only wanted gold coins and silver dollars. And history has a funny way of rhyming, doesn't always repeat, but things come full circle. One of my favorite phrases is always that the more things change, the more they stay the same. And to think that we are moving away from 5,000 years worth of accumulated wisdom that is anointed gold and silver assets of tremendous value is naive and foolish. To think that a digital currency, a digital asset, I should say, a set of numbers in an algorithm could replace gold is foolhardy and foolish. There's a place for both. I'm a believer in cryptocurrencies. I think there is definitely a place for both. I'm not saying it needs to be one or the other, but I guess what I'm really getting at, Elijah, is that what we are seeing is unabated volume on a retail level, and I'm seeing these puffs of smoke that are telling me that These are things I've never seen in 31 years, and now I'm seeing them all at the same time, all in different parts of the globe, and there is an expansion of understanding happening at the same time. Could it have something to do with that? The Wall Street Reddit group, could it have something to do with Wall Street silver? Maybe. Could it have something to do with cryptocurrencies? And just the greater understanding and awakening to what is happening with the worldwide fiat currency system. So anyways, I say all of this to you in that perspective, in that vein, where I do believe the market will identify itself by the inability to source product before this is all said and done. People don't understand we're perilously close to that already. And that comes at a time when just a very small percentage of people globally own any metals at all. And if we see a revision to where we were in 1980, where 8% of people's assets are dedicated to precious metals, you're talking a 16-fold increase from what we've seen for the past decade, where that number was 0.5%. And maybe it's 1% now, or 1.5%, or even 2%. And this tremendous volume we see represents a 2 or a 3 or a 4-fold increase in demand. And I believe that right now. What happens if it becomes 5 or 10% is the question, which is still woefully undervalued. So what I'm saying to you is this is an ever-evolving, fluid market, one that every day is crazier than the next, one where globally we are beginning to see cracks in the dam, and all centered around difficulty getting physical product, removing them from these synthetic, unallocated programs, or just actually buying metal from the various mints of the world. People are realizing quickly that it's becoming stupid difficult. So when we talk about things being free, like free storage at the Perth Mint, I will tell you 100% unequivocally, guaranteed, that in the precious metals world, nothing is free. Nothing. And if you're getting free storage, that's great. But when you need to become allocated, and it first involves fabrication, when times are nuts, and they're only mildly nuts to where they could be, if we see a 5 or an 8 or a 10% allocation, you realize that real quickly that nothing worthwhile is free. So I guess that would be my 2 cents on that subject, Elijah.
Now, mentioning the problems the mints are having, I asked viewers to submit questions, and Dave is wanting to know more about this. He asks, besides the retooling of the mints, how does the rest of the year look in terms of production? Is there a chance they will be cut off or limited from the supply of 1,000-ounce bars?
Well, maybe, yeah. I mean, I would argue that somewhat is what is happening right now. I mean, the mints will tell you that they just are, there's too much demand, and they're social distancing, and on and on and on. And, you know, by the way, I was told by someone who still believes it to be true that the U.S. Mint will shut down for a period of time. Is it going to happen? Don't know. But, I mean, there's so much dysfunction and rumor and innuendo that it's so hard to really figure out exactly what's happening. I guess cumulatively putting them all together, all of the rumors and the innuendo and the supposition cumulatively has greater weight in my mind than others might sense. But could it happen? Yeah, I would argue right now that there is a shortage of blanks for immediate delivery. There's too much demand and not enough supply, or the fact that they're that inefficient to me just doesn't seem legit. That it's one of the only areas of the government that actually makes money. So why not, exert maximum effort to get metal into the hands of the public when it actually enriches the U.S. government that is insolvent? Is another question for another day. But could it happen? Yeah, absolutely. It might already be happening. And so, in fact, I would argue it's pretty much been happening for the last 2 years. And we may see it continue to happen. So, good question. And I would say there's a high probability of mints just being overwhelmed and not being able to access enough in the way of blanks to keep up with the ever-increasing demand.
Joe is wanting to know about the premiums on silver eagles, and he makes a good point. And I think this is really interesting. As we're seeing premiums rise, it's not just when you buy silver that you're paying the huge premiums right now. Also, when you're selling silver or when we're buying silver, we have to pay huge premiums. And selling back silver, you're also getting the huge premiums. So he was wanting to know about, like what kind of premiums are we seeing right now on silver eagles when buying and when selling them?
Right now, the buy price is, I believe, $5.50, if I'm not mistaken, over the price of silver. That's almost $3 higher than I ever paid for them in my career. And that's if we're buying from the public. Part of that is because we have, which will probably be the highest bid price in the country, but we have really exerted as much effort and money into accumulating an inventory as humanly possible at these super high premiums. On Silver Eagles, you'll start at $9.50 silver to buy them, and on large quantities we'll get much lower than that. But 2021s, we would pay people, I think, as close to $7 over spot right now on buyback. So, you're talking very large premiums on, especially brand new ones, on anything, not just Silver Eagles, where the majority of the premium above the melt value is recaptured if and when you sell. I've seen them even higher, premiums higher than they are right now, where last March we would have paid $8.50, $9 over for Silver Eagles, and we may see that time again. So, yes, the phenomenon that is high premium is not just on the buy side; it's also on the sell side. I think people will find, if they want to sell metal back to us, that we will offer the highest bid price in the country.
Now, one of the things that we've been talking about, we've talked about before, is kind of how right now the demand is so extreme compared to what we've seen in years prior to this. This viewer is wanting to know about this and kind of what did the numbers look like at Miles Franklin when you compare, for example, the first quarter gold and silver sales of 2018, 19, 20, and 21?
We've done over $100 million in sales so far this year. That's a whole year in 2017 or 18, maybe 19. It's an incredible amount for a small company that's not online, where everything's done over the phone. It's 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, and unrelenting. And I feel blessed to be able to say that, because I remember for a long time what it was like to only wish for something like this. But it is unrelenting and borderline maddening, where it completely dominates my life 24/7, and it's only getting crazier. So I guess I will tell you that from a perspective of retail demand, it far exceeds anything I've ever experienced by a large magnitude. And where this pullback in price that we've seen hasn't had one bit of correlation with demand. In fact, I would argue that demand has increased as the price has been pulled back, and that's part of the thing. That's part of the greater narrative that gives me optimism, Elijah, is that people are waking up to what's going on. Where on February 1st, 1.5 billion ounces of silver, a year and a half worth of global mine supply, almost 2 years, was dumped at the open in an environment where demand couldn't have been stronger ever in the history of my career, 31 years, where February 2nd, we got more phone calls in one day than we ever have in 31 years, ever. And some genius dumps 2 years worth of mine supply at the open. That was done for effect. The market is manipulated. And the big money that has been trying to accumulate metal by manipulating prices for the past 5 years or longer, I think is running scared. And I think that you're beginning to see that by the level of effort that they employ to hold the price back, which is being understood by a widening group of people who are using it as a subsidy rather than being bummed out by it, where we used to see people just throw in the towel. Now they're doubling down because they know that the fundamentals far greatly exceed the manipulated price. And I'll say it again, and I mean this, price is a tool of misdirection. If price were going down and the sophisticated money was selling, I'd be bummed out. But as price goes down, the sophisticated money's buying it in copious amounts. see what's the difference there? They are using price to misdirect the public and using it as an opportunity to accumulate huge amounts. And that's why I'm so optimistic.
And regarding, precious metal manipulation, we actually created a playlist to give people, all perspectives, and so they can make their mind up on that. And one of the things that's really interesting is while we're seeing the price drop, on the physical side at our business, we're seeing next to no selling. And so the same viewer is wanting to know kind of what are the numbers when it comes to the amount we're seeing actually being sold back to us when it comes to, the last few first quarters of the last few years?
Next to nothing, Elijah, truthfully. I mean, literally next to nothing. 2017, when Bitcoin took off, 65% of the industry's transactions were people selling back to us. The other 30 years of my career, it's less than 1%. And right now, it's literally next to nothing. The only selling that we see are people trading gold for silver. That's about it. But no one is selling back anything, hardly at all. And so here again, if you measure demand in two ways, either by amount of new purchases or lack of selling, both are at all-time highs. No one's selling, and the demand is many times greater than anything I've ever experienced or ever even thought I would, for that matter.
And when it comes to purchasing gold and silver, this viewer is wanting to know, what is your perspective, like the best kind or the best value right now? I think we've talked about this before, and you say that silver is definitely possibly has more upside potential than gold, but they're wanting to know, and obviously we can't give financial advice on this channel, but your perspective, like if you had $10,000 to invest right now, what kind of allocation would you put between the main three precious metals, gold, silver, and platinum?
I'd put 100% into silver myself, based upon, you could make an argument for platinum, but to me, it's silver is where the real value is. That doesn't mean that ultimately you don't want to be in gold, but silver just offers way too much value. It's an asset that is depleting in nature, that has massive industrial uses and are growing, and is bracketed on either side between industrial demand and monetary demand, which is increasing dramatically. So you have an asset in terms of value that is half of its 1980 price, that is, what other asset can you say that about? But that is in demand in massive quantities and increasing, and is in a continual deficit of mine supply. And as I keep talking about, but I really want to hammer it home with people, is the new Chinese Belt Road and Rail Initiative. It's the most ambitious infrastructure project in human history. And not only will it be roads and rails and bridges, but it will also be digital infrastructure. But not only will it be digital infrastructure, which requires copious amounts of silver, but it will also be 65% of human population settling contracts in Chinese digital yuan instead of the dollar. So what does that portray for the dollar? What does that portray for silver supply? Across the board, I look at it with tremendous optimism and say that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a once-in-a-generation opportunity in silver, that you have an asset that is undervalued so tremendously, but that is also so needed and so demanded. It's a very unusual dichotomy, and not only that dichotomy, but also the dichotomy of industrial and monetary demand behind it. So you put it all together and you have maybe one of the most sought after asset classes on the planet and the most undervalued on the planet.
Now, when it comes to what kinds of gold and silver coins to invest in, or bars, some of them have security features. And if you look, for example, at the maple leafs, recently, just in the last few years, they added kind of lines going around the coin on either side to really give that greater security. And two viewers are actually wanting to know what kind of value does that actually add to the coin? Is it good to go for those coins instead of the coins that don't have those security features?
Well, the Royal Canadian Mint also has the micro engraving, the little tiny maple leaf that's engraved into it. And I mean, I guess they feel it's significant enough of a concern in terms of counterfeiting. I honestly never see counterfeit coins, rarely, if ever. I think people would be foolish to try to counterfeit legal tender. The likelihood of seeing counterfeit items in bars, large bars made by private refineries, is far greater than seeing it in any capacity in government-issued legal tender coins, just because of the counterfeiting aspect. Well, look, the new Type 2 Eagle is going to have these anti-counterfeiting measures embedded in them, and we don't know what they are. Is it a chip? Don't know. Is it micro-engraving? Don't know. But, in general, I think it's just better to stick with legal tender coins if you can. I think there's greater demand and less likelihood that you'll ever see counterfeiting in something like that. Besides, you'd have to be one hell of a metallurgist to counterfeit a 1 ounce coin, or to hollow it out in any capacity anyway.
This last viewer's question, they're wanting to know about if they're a first-time silver stacker, what do you think would be the best time to purchase silver?
On the dips, I guess, buying on the dips, not chasing the rallies. I guess for me, you develop a core position first, regardless of price, and then buy on the dips. In any asset class, that leads to success. Or on a broader spectrum, buying something when it's undervalued instead of chasing things that are overvalued. I mean, look at silver. How much more undervalued could it be? In many aspects, it's the most undervalued commodity on the planet. So buy it now, and then buy on the dips when you have the ability to afford that.
I think that's a really good point. And yeah, as we've talked about before, first and foremost, precious metals are there for insurance. So it's like, when do you get insurance? Well, right away, right? Does the price matter? Well, for the core position, maybe not.
No, it doesn't for the core position. And when you have the luxury of being able to make additions through cost averaging, great. But the core position should be, it's like when you come to the realization that you need a handgun for protection, you don't buy a handgun and then wait for bullets to go on sale. You buy a handgun with bullets, and then if you need more, you buy them fine when they're on sale. But what good is one without the other? And so I guess all I'm simply saying is that when you're talking about insurance and building a position and looking for value, I don't care what it's done recently. It's still half of its all-time high nearly. So is it undervalued? You tell me. What other asset class can you buy that is in this kind of demand, if any at all, regardless of demand, that's half of what it was in 1980? There's very few, if anything. Maybe computers, but that's about it. TVs.
All right. Well, Andy Schectman, we really appreciate your time today. If people would like to give us a call, they can call us at 1-800-822-8080 or email us at info@milesfranklin.com. Before we let you go, any last thoughts you'd like to leave with our viewers?
Well, like I always say, trust your gut. Don't look at the price. Price is a tool of misdirection. Trust your gut. Hang on tight. Look what the biggest money in the world is doing. It should give you comfort. And look at gold and silver as wealth, not as an investment. And it will be a whole lot easier to understand why you need to have it as part of your portfolio when you look at it as wealth that you hope you never need to use. And if you do, you're glad you got it. And it's not just for an emergency, it's for an opportunity as well. And if you don't need it, look at it as the purest way to pass wealth on to your family privately, or to a niece or a nephew or a charity or whoever. I just think that if you put things in perspective and look at them as wealth rather than an investment, it takes on a different significance. Sailing through the ups and the downs becomes much easier when you view it that way. So ultimately, I think it will perform as well or better than any investment on the planet. But look at it as wealth, the way that the influential people have since the beginning of time. Because I promise you, there wasn't a king or an emperor or a queen or a pharaoh or anyone of wealth and royalty throughout the last 5,000 years that called their gold dealer to buy gold as an investment. It was owned as a form of immutable wealth that's passed on through the generations. And that's kind of the way that I look at it. I hope I never need to sell an ounce. If I do, I'm darn glad I have it. If not, my children will inherit it.
All right. Well, Andy Schectman, once again, thank you so much for your time. God bless, and we'll talk to you next week.
You stay well, Elijah. Hope to talk to you soon. You take care.